Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have Jason Feldman, Senior Vice President with Wealth Management at UBS Financial Services, to discuss problem solving to address the lack of local funds and budget in New York City. And Jason, this is kind of like, an age-old issue that we see in the city. Would you say we are springboarding back from lockdowns to successfully reopen?
Absolutely. That's exactly the word I've been using. I think we are springboarding back. I have some metaphors I could share about how money is mismatched. There's imbalances. We hear about it with chips, microchips for automobiles, lumber spiking and coming back down, inventories needing to be rebuilt. So yeah, there's all sorts of ideas that talk in that direction. But generally, we're grinding toward normality and reopening slowly, and I think we'll get there.
What are some of the challenges?
So I think, some of it really comes back to communication, I think. In this particular case, I think a lot of people would take for granted that something like our Halloween Day Parade, right, which has been here for 50 years, on a good year, you'd have, 2019, 60,000 participants, and they say something like 2 million spectators on the scene. The idea of something like that, but people think that it just happens. They think the city pays. The city does coordinate with the director and the people all the artists that do this, but it really was private money, it was sponsorship. And because of this weird moment, maybe the sponsors weren't sure how many people would turn out, who would be watching. Whatever it was, by the time the approval came from the city, they were short.
Right. Yeah. Well, it also takes an army to almost execute on something as big as the Halloween parade. New York City and Halloween is like the best place to be on the planet. How are sentiment and psychology affecting markets and local economics?
Well, I'll tell you, in my thinking, and I have this metaphor that I use for clients for the last year, probably started a little early, but it all made sense and it's played out this way. So we had these trillions of dollars pumped into the system by central banks. And it helped pave over a very tough patch in our economy. Kept roofs over people's heads, kept food on the table, kept people in jobs, kept planes in the air when they went back to the air. The interesting thing, of course, is what happens if you're not fully open and you're not fully employed with those dollars. And the metaphor is, imagine having a leak in your home on the second floor, the top floor of your home. And let's say it goes unchecked for a long weekend, you're away with family and you come back. Where did the water go? It pools in the corner of the basement, right? It's pooled there. The same way that big parts of the economy actually did okay through this whole thing. There were people who were greatly affected, obviously, but a lot of people did well. Companies, we know some of the online retailers, they would have done better. But where did the money go if you can't spend it, if the restaurants aren't open, if people aren't taking vacations? So it pulled in the corner of the basement, so to say. And until you reopen, until you grind toward full employment or something, whatever that means, full employment, but we're not there now. As you grind toward normality, as restaurants open, venues open, little by little, you'll see that money trickle through the economy. And that's what happens with this parade. If you think about it, the parade will happen now. I'm very happy, very pleased that I was the one who had a very important role in that, I guess. But at the end of the day, think about it. People come into the city, mind you, on a Sunday night, that might be a quiet night. People are going to come in the city. They're going to go out with their friends and their family. Maybe they'll take their kids. This will be the first time I'm taking my 16-year-old daughter. Last year, it didn't happen. And if you think, so you go to restaurants, you go to bars, you'll go to maybe you'll stay at a hotel, maybe you'll go to a street vendor, and the ripple effect, the multiplier effect of money. This is really a great anecdotal story of how money starts to get redeployed.
Right. And Jason, I could tell you anecdotally from our studios at Market Site in Times Square, we have, we're at the corner, we're at the crossroads on 43rd and Broadway. And for those of you not familiar, that big, circular studio where Squawk Box is in the morning, that's also our studio. And, having gone back into the city since about February-ish to where we are now, I would say October 1st was almost like a light switch where that activity, I would say at least 75 to 80%, granted more tourists than we're seeing, commuters coming in and out for now, but it was almost like a light switch and
absolutely,
you can physically see it. So How can these issues be effectively resolved so we can continue to move forward in this city? It seems as if we're almost holding our breath to get through the winter when, of course, we all convene indoors. But what has to happen to keep New York City thriving and moving forward through the winter?
Well, again, moving through, before I get to that, I would also think beyond the winter, because we'll get through this winter. We'll get through this pandemic. Some would argue that maybe we're already through it. A lot of it is psychological at this point. People are nervous. You don't know who to believe, what to believe. People are afraid. I mean, it's been a scarring episode in our city, in our country, and around the globe. But I would say that, like, for instance, for this parade, people didn't realize to have a permanent fund, to think ahead, right? To have a contingency plan, to be well funded. Why should a guy as simple as me be able to swoop in, dig into my portfolio, use some highly appreciated stock to pay for a parade when there should have been permanent funding there, like a fund? There is no fund. So the idea that, these artists and the director who's been working on this for 40 years, the idea is how much work goes on behind the scenes, you have no idea. The idea that there might have been money set aside so they wouldn't have to scurry around at the last minute. Getting back to the bigger question of this winter, I think it takes courage. I really do. I mean, it takes a little bit of courage. I mean, we know that this virus is still with us. We know that the vaccinations have, penetrated a big piece of the population. We don't know how effective they'll be in the long run, without getting into all of that, but I'm not an expert on any of that. But it seems to me that we want to get back to normal. We should just get back to normal. It takes that leap of faith, maybe.
So, Jason, let me ask you a question. To put on a massive effort like Thanksgiving Day Parade, the Halloween Parade, and so forth, round number, if you had to guess, what does that cost to execute on something like that? And this includes that's a great
I mean,
how do you even quantify that? Because all the private companies that are coming in, what the city is doing, all the workers who are, derivative plays off of this, it's got to be staggering when you add it all up.
I think it's staggering, and this is one of those high return investments, right? And not just the emotional part of it, not just, like I said, I made an investment in smiles. Mm-hmm. In this case, it's not about that. This is free for New Yorkers. If you're a citizen of New York, this is, like, I would argue, good. This is tax dollars well spent. It's leveraged because of the multiplier effect of money. So I would say the parade, the director, the artists, all those people, insurance, which they pay for, that stuff probably comes. The numbers I heard kicked around was like 190 up into the 200s, and they were short 150 when I came along, right? Wow. How much does the city pay? I would say they probably, this is not their first rodeo. They've been doing this in an organized fashion for a lot of years. They have it down to a science. They know what it costs to clean up. They know what it costs for security, police, and the like, both clothed and unclothed, all that kind of stuff. I don't know what the numbers that are attached to that, but I would imagine that they're good at it at this point, that there's a good return on investment for the city as well.
All right, Jason, appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Have a great day.